So what we'll talk about today, obviously inspiring short game learning. So I don't know what everyone else's experiences are, but mostly on my end, juniors want to hit drivers, hit full shots, make the ball go far, not as interested in short game, putting, stuff like that. Of course, unless it's at like a mini golf course, then you might have a little more interest. But we'll talk about a couple things about how I kind of try to inspire that learning at Shaniqua and along with Milwaukee Area Youth Golf Academy, which I help teach in. So we'll kind of get started so we can get through everything. I'd like to kind of have some time at the end for some questions. So if I'm running long, Ian, just tell me. Sure. So we can get to questions. Just a couple things about me. Yes, teaching professional at Shaniqua Country Club. I've gone through some TPIs, so you guys know what that is. It's called the Titleist Performance Institute. They are kind of an industry leader in research development for what they call the body swing connection, which is mostly how your body moves and how you are built and how that goes into your golf swing. They also have junior curriculum, medical, power. They have a wide range of curriculums that they teach, and they have the benefit of really having access to all tours across the world, really. So much more access than I'll ever have, so that's pretty cool for them. Other stuff that's important. All right, so let's just start with short game, right? So I like to be pretty clear with my students. I think that's a big seller kind of for juniors. They're a little unsure of what they're supposed to do, even if it is just telling them to go, play and figure things out. You kind of have to have some guidelines, so that they're also clear what's going on. So a short game for adults usually inside about 100 yards, right? So it's really the act of controlling the distance that the ball travels without having a full swing, trying to hit it as far as you can. So putting, chipping, and pitching. So the two kind of words that I would describe for golf and just to kind of separate the two kind of games within a game is the powerful game and the powerless game. Okay? So powerful drivers, irons, hybrids, fairways, get the ball to go as far as you can. Powerless is what we're talking about today. You don't need a lot of power to make the ball go from A to B short distance. All right, again, just kind of being really clear with our juniors, I think that language matters. So language matters, right? So the two shots, right, that we kind of execute with our short game for the vast majority of the time is a chip shot and a pitch shot. And this actually goes to adults too. I've taught plenty of lessons where they are trying to hit a pitch shot, but they think it's a chip shot, vice versa. My friend told me this, another friend told me that. I think we could be a little more clear. A chip shot, it rolls more than it flies. Okay? Pretty easy. A pitch shot, more flight, less roll. The other kind of phrase that kind of coincides with a chip shot, what we hear a lot, is a bump and run shot. Now, I don't use that too much, especially with my juniors, only because I try to keep it to the two. I don't try to add in extra names for things. Now, there's also a flop shot, which is just a really high shot, but for our juniors right now, especially, this is the youngest junior group, right? We don't really have to worry about that one until they're a little bit older, so I really just try to keep it to the two. And the last two phrases, this isn't a terminology in class, but Loft. Loft is a big one for juniors because we can teach loft and we can teach make it go higher, add loft, decrease loft, but they need to know what loft even is. So loft is essentially how much is our club face pointing at the sky, pointing at the ground. And there's a couple things we can do, like change golf clubs to either add or subtract the loft. As our loft goes down, ball flight goes down, as loft goes up, ball flight goes up. So it's all very kind of easy things for us to understand, right? But as juniors who really don't know anything quite yet, especially in this youngest group, I think that's really important for them. And just to have some kind of a visual. So I think this is like an Amazon thing. But even if you had a picture somewhere on your phone and just kind of shows when you bring the club up, the stick points up, ball's gonna go higher. Bring the club forward, stick points down, ball's gonna go lower. Again, pretty simple stuff. And then the last one is choke down. So there is kind of the choke down and choke up. They both, to me, kind of mean the same thing, but I try, again, limit it to one. So the way I think of it is if I tell a junior to choke down, they're moving their hands down towards the ground. That makes sense? I mean, pretty, not necessarily earth-shattering stuff like that. Clear. Okay, the terms are done. Let's chat a little bit about how I kind of go about developing a short game. So, what's I think is a little bit interesting way that I do it when I first start teaching short game. It's probably not with a golf club right away. So the best thing we can do is kind of develop some athleticism in our juniors and some touch and feel before we start introducing golf club, balls, targets, etc. So a couple of really easy things that we can do that we'll get to here in a minute. But a lot of our time when we first start is really just learning how to make objects go a certain distance. After we can develop that a little bit, and that's not saying you can not touch a club until you can throw a ball 10 feet on the dot, right? We can intermix some of these things, but after we talk about that developing feel, we start to go more to the fundamentals, which is probably what you've seen much more of in maybe your kids have done some junior cup stuff or just lessons in junior golf at other clubs, stuff like that. This is more of what you're gonna see. It is the stance, it's how do we hold the club, all that kind of fun stuff. And then the last step is really encouraging and allowing some exploration of short games. So, we'll chat a little bit about that, but, allowing our juniors to explore short game will kind of create some kind of creativity in them, right? So, one example is just essentially doing a drill, I think obstacle course, right? It's a drill in your manual, and I just have them do that with a sand wedge one time, and then they have to do that with an 8-iron the next time. So they have to figure out how to make the ball go higher or lower with different clubs. And that's not saying that they're going to use that exact shot on the golf course, but it's encouraging them to further learn some feel and get a little more creative with their short game, because you're never going to have really the same short game shot. The driver shot to me is a driver shot. You want it to go far and straight. Short game, we have a target, but it's always going to be a different distance. Right? Any questions on any of that stuff so far? Cool. All right, so step one, develop some feel. So again, I take away the golf club. There's a bunch of things that we can do, and we'll just kind of run through a few. What we have up there is slides right out of TPI. So they start a lot with throwing, right? So we have our max fly nets here, usually meant for chipping balls into, but we can just have our juniors say, okay, take maybe 5 steps, throw it into the number 1. Okay, great. How hard did you have to throw that? Well, I didn't have to throw it very hard. Okay, great. Take 2 more steps back, try to throw it into the number 1 again, and right? But it was fairly close, so what did you have to do? Well, maybe I had to throw it a little bit harder. Okay, great. Well, because you were a little bit farther. And one thing that I always like to talk about with kind of this developing feel, and you know, for kids, maybe they don't think about it as much, and adults, maybe we don't either, but we all drove here, right? So when you were backing the car out of the garage today, did we slam on the gas, or did we gently take our foot off the brake and the car kind of idled back? I hope the second one. Right? Coffee drinkers in here? Anyone? Show of hands. Okay, me too. Gotta have a big old coffee at least once a day. I get a nice hot cup of coffee. My first sip is not tilting it all the way back and burn my entire face, right? Okay, no, we kind of slowly get the coffee into our mouth because we want to test how hot it is, whatever. So those are all things that we already do in our daily life. For our juniors, you know, maybe they are, let's say, just coloring a picture, right? You give them a crayon, here, color this golfer real quick, color him in red. And I'll even, you know, sometimes have the pictures with me, here, color this. And they'll color it, right? And I'll say, well, why didn't you jam the crayon into the paper and push as hard as you possibly could? And they'll say, well, because you didn't need to, because right, like I just went like that, and then the golfer turned red. Well, great. Same thing happens right here. So it's a little bit, you know, different way of thinking about it, but I think it's really relatable, and I think we can also make it clear and relatable. Now we have something, right? All right, let's get into the fundamental stuff. All right, so now once we start, you know, we can throw, kick, all that stuff. Once we've done that, maybe that's a station or 2 within the class, right? Now we're going to work on some fundamentals. So we're going to start with chipping. I like to start going chipping and then pitching. If we're taking putting out, I like to think of it in terms of the lowest ball flight to the highest ball flight, and then kind of go from there. And as we kind of go into full swing stuff, which would be the highest. But we're taking out putting for this moment. Starting with chipping. You guys have this great teaching manual, and that picture is directly out of your manual. So a couple of things that I might add there is just how we hold our golf ball. So for chipping, I could really describe it as a putting type grip with chipping, because that ball is not going to go much higher than a putt, and it's going to roll out like a putt. So I tend to have what's called like a palms facing grip. So essentially, if you put your palms together on the club, close your hands. Now we have this situation where our hands are kind of just on the side of the club, especially this left hand is on the side of the club. What I see a lot happens is if we kind of teach our juniors, you know, in your manual to kind of have the left hand a little more on top of the grip, and that's really good for full swing. I love it. But with chipping, it gets hard to kind of set the club at a good height, and I kind of have my juniors have the club up just a little bit, so it gets a little bit harder to do that when the hand is all the way on top of the grip. Also, it's such a small swing that we don't want a whole lot of face rotation in our chipping swing. So all that just to say, let's try to keep our palms kind of facing each other, just make it really easy for the juniors. The stance. I think it's really important. It already says kind of have a narrow stance in your manual, but I think this is another part of making it really clear and pretty visual. I just have these feet that I'll have out for junior practices, and when we're chipping, I like to say one club head between our feet. So that's about there, and I'll just have my juniors stand on those feet, palms facing grip. The ball position is already in the manual, but if you kind of keep that visual there for our juniors, then we can kind of create the same setup every time, which is really important for short game, especially for juniors. I would say the weight forward, I think, is perfectly right for chipping really in all short game. But I think there's a way to do it. So when I teach, I'll get a lot of, okay, put your weight forward, and I get a lot of this. Now is my weight forward? Totally. But my head's a little bit back, and now I have a little bit of this tilt to me. Now what happens is when we get a little too much tilt to us, we start to hit a little bit, behind our golf ball. And, if we're inside on the mats, you might get away with it, but as we go outside and like matches and stuff like that, that's where you start to see the ball go a couple feet, that kind of stuff. So when I say, have weight a little bit forward, I like to think of it as, get the buttons a little more either at or in front of the golf ball. So as they do that, you can kind of see our model, there's going to be a little bit of tilt in the shoulders just because that right hand is just naturally lower than the left hand. But if we can limit that tilt, then we can kind of make a little bit better contact easier. One thing I like to do for contact is just, have you seen any of these are, I think this is also on Amazon. I'm a big Amazon guy, something learned that. So essentially all this is kind of a felt pad, and there's a dot right in the middle of it, and as you make contact with the pad, you'll see where the club hit. So again, this could be something that there's no ball with the junior yet, and we learn how to do, to make the contact, and then we add the golf ball, right? So I might have them get set up. Let's go one club head, buttons over, or at least to our left of our golf ball, make our swing. Okay, great, you hit at the dot and forward. If we can do that 3 times, all right, now we can go with our golf ball, and what we should see with our golf ball is the ball pops up in the air a little bit, and then rolls out to wherever, all right? So you're kind of encouraging them to, accomplish a task without the golf ball. Say, okay, look, if you added a golf ball to that's what would happen. It would be a really kind of clean chip, and it would do kind of what you're looking for it to do. Then we can add the golf ball. All right. So that's a big part of making it visual. You can do feet, you can do felt pads, you can do wide range of things. There's a bunch of little tools and gadgets everywhere around here. I tend to not buy very expensive things because don't want to break the bank, and you guys are just here once a week. Is it once a week? Something like that?
Once a week.
Twice? Yeah. So it doesn't have to be very expensive stuff. It just has to be visual. The last thing, just hit the ground, right? I mean, that's a felt pad thing, but the first kind of sense is to help the ball go into the air, so we start to maybe fall backwards and try to get the ball to go really high because everyone likes to see the ball go up in the air. Well, I will spend a lot of time just having our juniors run the club head into the ground just to kind of get that feel into them. All right. Questions on any chipping stuff before we move on to some pitching?
I guess there's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Do you want him to use the wedge so it doesn't have so much bounce on it, or?
I'm sorry?
The wedge versus a sand wedge, so it doesn't have too much bounce? Do you have a preferred club for that?
Yeah, so I like lower lofted clubs first, and then build into higher lofted clubs. So yeah, good point. Like I'll even start with a 9 or 8 iron, just for this particular shot. Really good question.
So I know when I was teaching my daughter originally, she struggled with, I was trying to have her choke down on the club. It just feels like awkward for kids. Like, is there anything that, like, I guess how far down would you suggest to like teach them, just to give them a little bit more control?
Yeah,
you know?
great question. So I would do one simple kind of test, and if we actually I want to stand up real quick. We can all do this. It's nice to run a little bit, or not, but we're gonna do it anyway. That's okay. All right. So if we just stood, shoulder width apart, hands on our thighs. If we just bend forward until the tips of our fingers are just over our knees, and we'll have a little bit of kind of feeling of a stretch in the hamstrings. Okay. Now we'll kind of let our knees soften, let the arms hang down, and that's going to be a pretty darn good posture. So that might be some full swing a little bit, but also with pitching. Now with short game, all right, for chipping, because this is just the chipping conversation, I would say maybe the hands are going to go kind of to the mid thigh, let them hang down, and wherever that club sits, that's where we're going to hold it.
Okay.
Now, to your point though, maybe it's a little awkward, and sometimes what I'll see is, let's say this is my setup. When we say choke down, we'll go like this, and now we sit here. So my rule is, however much we choke down is however much we scoot in. Okay. So let's say I'm down 3 inches, I'm gonna move in 3 inches. So now I'm still in that same type of posture. I'm just a little bit closer, making the club a little bit shorter.
Okay.
Try that one.
Okay.
That might help awkwardness a little bit.
Thank you.
Both really good questions. Love it. Anything else before we move on? Yes.
Even though you're saying like palms facing forward, are you still like, I'm just starting to teach my 9-year-old the interlock, or the interlock with the grip. Do you still want her to keep the interlock, just keep the palms facing each other, or go even more natural?
Totally. So if that is what your child has kind of learned, that interlock, they can interlock really for anything, any shot. Really. I know in the manual there's a little bit different putting grip and double overlap, I think is in the manual. But especially for kids as young as this group, it can be pretty consistent. It'll be fun. But good question. Yes. Anything else? Or move on to the second pitch. Okay. All right. So pitching fundamentals. Again, pretty easy. I just want to make sure I'm not going over time too. Biggest difference. Well, there's a lot of differences, I would say. So, first things first, the stance is a little wider, right? Because the swing is going to become a little bit bigger. So again, easy thing to kind of relate to. Small stance, small swing, medium stance, so maybe pitching, maybe it's more of a medium swing, and then bigger stance, driver, big swing, right? So at Shaniqua we use our some letters, so we'll go I, and then Y, and then A. So I always refer, are we gonna have a big A or a small A, right? So again, we can go right back to our feet here, right? So we got one club head. Well, now I got 2 club heads, so I can have these feet still visual for my junior. Tend to have the ball position just right in the middle of the feet, and you can put a stick down in between the feet, just to again keep it really consistent for them, and essentially kind of set them up so that they can't put themselves in a poor setup. The grip, because now this starts to be a little bit bigger of a swing. Now I start saying, okay, we can, whatever you were using with your driver, we can use now. Okay, so now we're backing ourselves up. Maybe it's, for juniors, maybe it's 30 yards, 40 yards, something like that. They're gonna need a little more speed, a little more swing. We can go back to that normal grip. I like to, and really for all shots, but in this shot in particular, I like to aim the club first and then set our feet. So if I tell them, okay, we have our 2 club heads, so our medium A is what I would say. I would say, okay, well, we're gonna start with the feet nice and close. We're gonna make our Y, right? Or just aim that face first in the direction we want the ball to go, and then we can set our feet and make those that kind of 2 club head width stance. And then these shots, this is where we do start getting into. Who asked the question about higher lofted, right? So now we are going to get into a few higher lofted clubs, like a sandwich, maybe a pitching wedge. Anyone have U.S. Kids clubs in here? Is that a thing, or is it? All right. Well, U.S. Kids, some club sets come with sand wedges, some just come with pitching wedges. There's a bunch of options you can have, whatever. I think U.S. Kids does a good job. But yeah, now we're going to start getting into those higher lofted clubs, and this is where we're going to allow them to really start to swing their arms a little bit more. So as our TPI guy up there, I like to think of it as kind of matching your swing on both sides. So in a chipping motion, right, maybe this club is going to work, kind of under your knees. And there's not going to be a whole lot of swinging of our club. As we start to pitch, I'm going to start allowing the kids to feel like they're letting the club work a little bit more up. So maybe rib height, and we're going to swing through their rib height on the other side. This one is probably a little bit trickier of a shot for juniors, just because they have to not make a full swing and also make the ball go a certain distance, right? But this is, if you just kind of keep, in my experience, telling them kind of the same types of things and setting them up a little bit more visually so that they can kind of see what's going on, they'll start to get it. With pitching, I would say, especially to start, it's much more about where that ball actually hits the ground instead of where it ends up. So I have a couple of rings out here. I would say, all right, well, let's, if I had to, for instance, hit a ball into just this first kind of 2-line box, right? Well, what would I do? And it goes back to your touch and feel, would I bring the club way up here, or would this be more of our chip? All right, I'm going to say it's going to be more of the chip. Okay, great. If I'm going to hit a ball more towards that red ring, and I want to land the ball in that ring, what would we do? Well, if we make that same swing, right, maybe that ball ends up in that red ring or a little bit past it, but it doesn't hit inside of it. So now we're going to say, okay, well, what do we do with our pitching? Can we make the swing a little bit bigger? So now we'll try to make this bigger, help them swing the arms. Okay, a little bit long. Okay, well, what happened there? Well, did we have too much speed? Did we swing too much? Okay, well, I think I swung a little too much. Okay, great. Let's try to swing a little bit less. So I want you to set up the same way. 2 club heads. Let's try to swing a little bit less. Okay, great. Was that farther or shorter, or farther or closer to the target? Well, that was a lot closer. Well, great. Well, what did you do? Well, I felt like I didn't swing the club back so much. Okay, great. There you go. All right, so like kind of having those conversations, like asking a lot of questions, we'll get into that in a little bit, but like that is massive for juniors because, you know, they'll figure it out. I mean, they climb monkey bars and they do all sorts of stuff, right? They know how to do things. They just don't know that they know how to do things. Questions on pitching? All right, so some putting. We'll just go over this kind of briefly. Again, just a visual thing. All this is kind of in your teaching guides. But one of the biggest things for the visual side of putting is I like to use really three things. This first thing is just a putting mirror, which you guys have a couple here. And really all that is hey, can you see your eyes in the mirror? You know, especially at this age, do you have to be perfectly in the exact same spot every time? Ideally, sure. Is it a necessity? No. But if we are over here where we can't see our eyes, that could become problematic. Putting, I see a lot of like this in putting. I'm sure that you see that too. That can also be problematic. All right. So as long as, you know, usually these mirrors have a line right in the middle and then a line somewhere near the inside part of the mirror. As long as our eyes are somewhere between there, perfect. Okay. Second thing I really like with putting is just this two-color golf ball. And all that, yes.
So, does it make sense to, when you're working with the juniors, to focus on, because the swing mechanics are a little bit the same, the chipping and the putting maybe together, and then separate a session around pitching? Would you recommend doing that, or do you kind of the sequence that you're doing, reviewing with them that way?
Yeah, honestly, I think you can really do it either way.
Okay.
I would say if you're going to putt, it is kind of putting, and then you kind of go to chipping, which you can then say, hey, remember when we did this with putting? Yeah, try this so we can see the ball go up in the air. But I separate it as best I can. But really, like, you could almost format a day of like, hey, this is the more roll day, right? So yeah, some chipping, putting concepts. So that would be good. So it's pretty consistent, right? But yeah, good question. But anyway, with this ball, it's really simple. All it is it's just testing to see if they're hitting it with a pretty much a square face. So we're gonna have the ball kind of, you know, middle, maybe slightly forward, middle of the stance. We're gonna be able to see our eyes. We have our putting grip. Now, you can put tees in here just to kind of limit the backswing for, you know, when they first start, because as the swing gets bigger, the club tends to move around a little bit more. But we can make it really small and just see, hey, is that ball rolling, where you can kind of see both of the colors rolling down the line. Again, it doesn't even have to be at a target. That can be its own drill. Like, hey, go, you know, for this couple minutes, we're just gonna roll this ball into different areas and see if we can just get it to roll where the black and the white line, or whatever color they are rolling together. Right? Don't have to be a make or miss thing. And then the last one, which I think is probably the most important because it's also developing some feel, is just how far to make the ball roll. And we like to do that just by lengthening or shortening the swing. So we can add this ball in here, and let's just, you know, I don't necessarily make holes that they have to make it, because I think that adds in another layer of like, oh, well, if I miss, I didn't do it right. Or it's like, no, you probably did do it right, but maybe it hit something, kicked it off, whatever. So, you know, I have just these these dots. I'll put colors on them, you know, whatever, and just say, okay, if we're going to go to the red dot, you know, do you think this putter should go kind of green to green, or should it go black to black? Probably green to green. Okay, great. Okay, try it. So maybe they'll go like, you know, that. And be like, well, was that green to green, or was that black to black? I think that was more black to black. Okay, great. Let's try again. And can you make it go kind of green to green? So they'll say, okay, let's try green. Okay, what did that end out? closer, farther away from the target, closer, perfect. And you kind of keep moving on like that. I mean, you could probably get to maybe 15, 20 feet on a black to black putt. But that is part of kind of our next process of short game learning. Question on putting. I know that was brief, but I think putting, there's so much material in that, in the manual that's really good. So I don't want to spend too much time on putting when we're pitching. Is that cool with everyone? Yes.
Just real quick on the grip for putting,
Yeah,
obviously there's like 9,000 grips that
Of
you
course.
can. I mean, is there one or two that like you just try to do the normal grip? Is that where you start?
Yeah,
or?
honestly, again, I think it's like a double overlap in the guide, but I have juniors that if they interlock their fingers, as long as they're kind of like palms facing, that's what I do. And really it's, you know, usually the putters will have this flat part right on the top of the grip. It's like, hey, just put your thumbs down the grip. And that will generally make the hands go palms facing. Yes?
I didn't have anything.
Oh, okay. But yeah, to answer your question, it's however they want to hold it. Honestly, I have juniors hold it like a baseball bat. Now, is that right or wrong? I don't know, but they make butter putts, so I don't change it. But good question. Anything else on putting before we move on? How am I doing? No, not bad. I like the rambles. All right. Exploration. This is where I think, honestly, it gets to be a lot of fun. So a lot of those conversations that I kind of had with myself as I was working through this, presenting, that is a lot of the exploration. All right. Encourage them to use a bunch of different clubs. Hey, like, you know, I have this drill set up. I'm gonna take my 8-iron and my 54, and I'm gonna say every ball has to land between the ropes, and then we're not gonna put a hole there, but I'm just gonna have these cones set up, and we're gonna see, you know, where does that ball stop? So we're gonna, more specifically chipping for this, because we really wouldn't use an 8-iron to pitch. I'm gonna start with a 54. Okay, you know, Jim, what's the steps for our chipping? Well, we need to have our feet nice and close and our palms facing, and the ball's kind of in the middle. Perfect. So let's make a swing that's big enough to get that golf ball to land in between our ropes, right? Okay, landed between the ropes. All right, it went just past the first cone. So that's kind of like almost like a 1-to-1 little bit, kind of fly to roll. It gets to, you know, usually on turf it's a little bit faster. On grass it's a little slower, so it's usually about 1-to-1. So, okay. Now, Jimmy, if I showed you an 8-iron, and now the loft kind of points like that, instead of pointing a little more up, what do you think is going to happen? Well, I don't know yet. It's probably what you're going to get the first time. So, okay, well, fine. So I'm not going to tell you the answer, right? I'm going to let you find out the answer, okay? So I'm going to say, okay, Jimmy, we're going to now hit your 8-iron. Same way. Maybe we have to choke up a little bit because now the club's longer, right? Or choke down, I should say. Not choke up, choke down. Language matters. So, one club head, choke down, ball in the middle. Okay, same idea. Land that golf ball anywhere between those ropes. Okay, here I go. Okay, Jimmy, great job. You accomplished it. All you had to do was get that ball to land somewhere in here. What happened? Well, the ball rolled a lot more. Well, why do you think the ball rolled more? Well, because the stick was pointing like that, not like that. Perfect. So, Jimmy, when do you think if you're playing on a golf course, when do you think you might use that club instead of your sand wedge? If it's farther or shorter, probably it's farther. 100% right. Right? So, you know, that is a pretty normal conversation, and I guarantee that the first time they go out on the golf course, they're gonna pick the wrong club. And they're gonna have, you know, they're gonna be right in front of the green, the flag is all the way in the back of the green, they're gonna hit their most lofted club. They might try to hit a chip, and then it's gonna go like 10 feet, and they have 40 feet left. So as parents, that's when you can kind of make a note of that, like, okay, like on the second hole, he could have did that, but he chose this option, okay. So then after the round's like, hey, remember on the second hole when you were like in the front of the green and the flag was way in the back of the green? Yeah. What happened? Well, I didn't hit it hard. Like, okay, well, like, remember when we were at the junior cup training in the winter and we were hitting those 8-irons and it rolled more? Oh, yeah, we did do that. Okay, maybe next time, let's try that, right? And we'll see what happens. Now, the next time, are they going to do it? Maybe not. But it's still kind of having that kind of message to them, right? Hey, try to use that 8-iron, or even in our training, you know, sessions. That's why I like to use a lot of 8s and 9-irons, so that they're kind of already used to doing it. All the high lofted shots, all that stuff, that's down the road. We'll learn it. That's fine. You can get it on the ground rolling towards the target. Really, really important. Great landing areas, right? So again, there's a million reasons why a ball doesn't end close to the hole. The big reason is that we usually try to start with, we try to hit it at the hole. Where for me it's, okay, where do I want to hit it so the ball lands on the green or in a general area, and then it's going to roll towards the hole. So in my practices, especially, you know, beautiful big area here, put out a bunch of different targets. These rings, you got a bunch of them here. So, okay, I want you to hit it to, you know, maybe I put one of the dots in the, okay, I want you to hit it to the red dot. Okay, now I want you to hit it to the purple dot. That's going to be 20 feet farther than the green dot, which is going to be 30 feet shorter. So get them to understand, like, hey, my swing is really around where is the golf ball actually hitting the putter, not is it ending close to the hole or not, because that comes with the landing edge stuff. All right. I try best I can to provide instruction in smaller doses and kind of let the junior kind of drive the bus in their learning with this stuff. Okay? Just everything that we kind of talked about, just keep asking them the questions, right? Say, hey, let's try to hit all these shots with our 8-irons, and what does more loft look like? What does less loft look like? Ask them questions and let them kind of drive it. Like, hey, I wanna try to hit 9-irons here. Okay, try it. Like, what's gonna happen? Just here, that's fine. Let them explore it. Questions on anything of that. So this is really where we start to see the creativity come out, and where really good short game players thrive. Is they can hit any shot with any club in the back. Not that they'll always do it on a golf course, but they're really good at one-club challenges. Yes.
Will we have access to like some longer grass turf to be able to practice with them too, or versus just the short season?
Yeah, I mean, we have some you can see, throughout.
Okay.
You can always find it. It's probably on the side somewhere.
Okay.
I really like games, the short game, and that goes for putting, especially putting, because honestly, to just sit there and hit 3-footers for an hour is just brutal. I would not do that. And if I wouldn't do it, the juniors definitely wouldn't do it. So I love playing some games, and I like having a lot of stations and having juniors move around a lot. So, like I have, right now I shoot like in the winter, one simulator, and then a small putting space, a lot smaller than even just this part here. And we'll have maybe 3 kids at a time for like a high school thing, and then we'll have 3 or 4 different stations or tasks that they have to accomplish within our session. I love keeping stations to like under 10 minutes for this stuff, because honestly, it's gonna go 2 ways. One, if you're there too long, they're not gonna wanna do it anymore. That's kind of how it is. Or 2, they're having so much fun at that game, and you say, okay, time to switch, and they really wanna go back to it later. That is, if you can have that kind of culture or just environment, they will be lifelong golfers. Perfect. So if I have, a place like this, you can have a couple putting stations, a couple short game stations here. We have a bunch of different paths to hit on. We could go, 5 stations, make it 8 minutes. You have 40 minutes of work improving their short game without even knowing that they've improved their short game. So that's good. Just a couple game ideas. Battleship is kind of one of our juniors' favorites. So essentially we'll have, a red ring and a yellow ring set up, and you have 2 teams. Kids kind of like being on a team, kind of working as a team. So I'll say, okay, I need 3 golf balls to land in that red ring, and 1 golf ball to land in that yellow ring. You guys are gonna switch off every time. You got team red, team blue. As soon as you knock out that battleship, you can go to the board, you put an X, then you're going on to this battleship, and whoever can knock out the other team's battleship first wins the game. So it's kind of up tempo, kind of gets kids to kind of focus in on a landing area. Again, I do it a lot with landing areas instead of, okay, it has to stop this far away from the hole, especially at a younger age. Throw one, hit one. I think this is a pretty fun game, just as an individual game. So, if I go, and this one is more of an end target game. But if I say, okay, I want you to go to the first cone, and I'm going to grab your wedge, and we're going to grab one of our foam baseballs. And the game is, we're going to throw one first. So do that first cone. And they're going to throw it something like that. Okay, great. Now the game is, can I now hit one of my golf balls closer than I threw it? And you can kind of set some parameters to what counts and what doesn't count, because sure you can throw it at the back wall, yeah, it's gonna closer. But you can say, okay, if you can get it, first to 5, right? And then I'm gonna make my swing and get it end up closer. It did, so I would get a point. Right, pretty easy game, but promotes a little bit of this idea of kind of this throw and how fast is your arm moving. Did you fire the ball at the cone, or did you kind of gently toss it? Very good for short game. Lollipop putting is the last one. So this one's, again, really easy. You can use kind of like the birdie tees, because not everything sticks in the ground, right? But these mats do. But essentially, it's just teaching them kind of how to aim their putter and make a swing that is going to make the ball go towards the target. So you have your 3 tees, you put a ball on each, and you just tell them, okay, I want you to knock every ball off of the tee. So if they can hit that tee, they can certainly get the ball into the hole, right? And they're going to miss, just like I did. That's okay. And you set up 3 or 4, and you make that a game. I would say, especially for younger kids and the older kids, the younger kids, I might only have them 2 feet away from our tees. Older kids, maybe I'll have them 3, 4 feet. So it kind of, you bring the game to the child's level, right? And then there's a bunch of coaches guide games excuse me, in your manual. They're all really good. Got to read through them. They're great. Easy to set up. Kids will have fun with them. Last thing is you mentioned about things about kind of etiquette stuff and short games. So my biggest thing that I've always said is baby grass versus adult grass. So if you're horsing around your parents, right? The adults are much bigger than you. You're not really gonna hurt your parents, right? But let's say you had a baby brother, you would not roughhouse with your baby brother because you might hurt your baby brother. So with our grasses, anything on a putting green, that's like our baby grass. So we have to be very, very careful. So what would we not want to do? Well, how would we be not careful with our baby grass? Well, if we run on our baby grass, do you think that would hurt it? Yeah, probably. Okay, so are we going to run on baby grass? No, we're not going to run on baby grass. A lot of it, I get a lot of the hit the putter into the ground kind of thing, or taking swings on it. And it's, you know, do you think that would that hurt the baby grass to make a big swing like you were hitting out of the rough and you're getting a bunch of grass to fly up? Would that hurt the grass? Yes. Okay, so, you know, we work on a lot of these like little slower swings on our baby grass. So we always have to be a little bit slower and softer when we're in this area. One thing that's kind of helped, I'm a big hockey guy, so I've kind of got a penalty box. So, you know, I can literally draw out a box and you put a bench in there. First time a child's running on where they shouldn't run, it's, all right, hey, that's a warning. Second time, 2-minute minor, sorry, just like slashing. To the penalty box, unfortunately, they can't participate in that activity for 2 minutes. And that's enough time for them to go, this kind of stinks. The third time, sorry, 5-minute major. That's, we've told you twice, you're still doing it. Come on, and these are all expectations that I set up pretty early, right? These aren't just sprung on them that day. Third time, 10-minute major, or 10-minute misconduct actually. It's like, you know, we've now told you 3 times, you're still doing it, and sorry, gotta go in for 10 minutes. It's gonna be a long time. You kind of wasted a really good chunk of your day where you could have been playing, but you chose to do X, Y, Z. And then the last one, you know, if it goes anything past that, which I never had to go past 3, kicked out of the game, sorry. Like, go to another station or we'll just have to call your parents or whatever. But that's kind of how I've handled the etiquette part. And excuse me, I usually will keep track, like on the golf course too, if I see anything. A lot of times I'm not on the golf course with them, but you guys get to be on the golf course. So that's a big advantage. Okay, that's what I did say 5 minutes for questions. Great. What other questions do we have? About anything. Golf, it could be anything. Great. Must have explained it that good, eh? Alright, well, anyway, thank you guys very much for having me, and I certainly applaud all of you for really kind of taking time to come learn some stuff. You know, everything we talked about today, these are my opinions. You might go to other coaches, they have other opinions. Totally on them, perfect. But it's good to have all this education because as you see other presentations, you can kind of decide for yourself what fits and what doesn't, right? Like I've learned from a million different people. I don't teach everything I've learned, but you kind of piecemeal it together and you kind of have a little bit of a system. That's kind of what you guys do. So it's awesome that you guys are here and really taking an interest in the coaching side. Because as coaches, we only get them for maybe once a week. You know, you guys as the parents, you guys are with them, taking them to the golf course, taking them to junior cup matches, taking them to practice out of the matches. So you guys kind of know what's going on. That's huge, huge advantage. So I applaud you guys for that. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.